I'm Natalie Nidham, your host. Now get ready, because Dr. Ted Achacoso is back. And, shocker, he brought both wicked science and wicked sarcasm and humor with him. Dr. Ted is one of the few humans trained across neurology, pharmacology, AI, and nutritional medicine. And he's on a mission to shift healthcare from what's wrong with you to what's right with you. We talk about self-stress pathways, the self-injury response, how something as simple as a toxicity panel can change a patient's entire trajectory, and the underestimated power of vitamin D, especially if you live somewhere with more snow than sunlight, like, for example, yours truly right now. We also hit doom-scrolling mitochondria and why doctors should probably stop ignoring metabolomics. This one is sharp, honest, and hilarious. This episode is brought to you by Troscription's Tromune, Digestive Bitters from Just Thrive Health, and Trank Dart from Wizard Sciences, all with special offers just for you, the listener. Check out the show notes below for details, but first, enjoy the show. Dr. Ted Achacoso, welcome to the show. This is going to be a ride, and people have no idea.
Thank you for inviting me to your show, Nat. We've known each other for a while, and each time we're together, it's just a riot. We're always just laughing about, the brilliant things that people do with things that they could get hold of.
Yeah, we do. But, laughing is great medicine. And given the level of physician that you are, I'm not surprised that we do a lot of laughing together.
Yes, there's laughing yoga. Have you ever tried it?
No. So my son was at puppy yoga the other day.
Puppy yoga.
Yeah. So he sent me these pictures and I'm like, these are really cute, but did you do any yoga? He's like, no.
No, I learned about laughing yoga many years ago, because as a medical student, I was doing yoga, actively doing yoga until, of course, I was doing my handstands and my headstands and whatever stands. And I started getting cervical spurs. So I stopped that thing.
Love it. And apparently your head was not meant to be stood on.
I now know that. I now know that. Yeah.
Who knew? All the yogis are like slamming at their computers going, it's not true. I'm like, some of the most injured people I've met were yogis. So, I just want to say, what is it? Ashtanga yoga? Mm-hmm. That's like intense stuff. But laughing yoga, yeah. Well, isn't that just like going to a comedy club and sitting on the floor or something? No.
It's like there is a discipline to laughing itself. Like even if there's something is not really funny, you are going to force yourself to laugh at it. And the main thing is actually to exercise your diaphragm. And, and release. And there was this woman actually in London. I heard her in a podcast, and her whole PhD and life is devoted to the study of laughter, why we laugh, right? Mm. So it's just this immediate dissipation of what was construed to be threatening, right? And then it's like, oh, okay, that is funny.
That's so interesting. I'm going to have to find that woman. I think that would be a really interesting podcast.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well, you just threw me right off track here.
I'm good at that.
I know. Well, let's get back to Ted because, if I could go through your biography here and honestly, we'd be here for a really long time. But suffice to say that a man who gets through med school at age 22 and then goes on to get like umpteen other degrees in many other disciplines, which you guys can read the show notes for the whole thing because it's nothing short of jaw-dropping. But what I'd love to know is, what were you like as a little kid? Did your parents know you were going to grow up to be who you are? Like, did they have any insight that this? You're just brilliant, Ted. So
thank you. I didn't believe that when I was young. I was just thinking that everyone saw what I saw, until my mom sat me down and said, you are seeing the letter C, the letter Z, and your classmates are still seeing the letter C. So just shut up. But anyway, this is how I was. I was actually Because of the fact that my mom forgot that I was only 4 years old, she enrolled me in kindergarten. So
Maybe because
where
you were asking too many questions and you were making her crazy.
shut up. But then I was, when they found I was only 4 years old, they couldn't take me back and move me over to the first grade because I was in honors class. So and that was funny because I always fought with the nuns. I went to a Catholic school run by Paulinian sisters, Columban friars, and
Oh
and
no. That can't have been good.
I tell this story to friends. It's like when the nuns told me that I had original sin, and I screamed at her, 4 years old, and said, "No, you have. I don't. You have original sin. Why are you accusing me of that?" But
I'm only 4. How could I possibly?
and so that was the kind of child I was, and so always called to the principal's office for these kinds of questioning. And I remember the Catholics at least this confirmation at second grade, right? And it was rehearsing with the bishop, and of course he had to know how to answer properly. Do you renounce Satan? And I said, why should I? He hasn't done anything to me. And
That must have gone well.
off to the principal's office you go. But anyway, I was lucky because my father, whenever we moved, there was always a library in the house. Like he wouldn't settle in a house without a library, and that's where I got my habit that studying is just one of the normal things that you do, right? It's not something special. It's not something that you have to sit down and actually focus, etc. It's just part of your life. You do it because you are intensely curious about the world around you, right? Yeah. So that's the kind of mentality.
So curiosity.
Yeah, and then whenever before we left the house, there was a blackboard in front of the dining table where you had the word of the day, where you had to use it in a sentence before you left for school, right?
No way.
Oh, yeah. And that was my mom, right? It was fun. For me, it was fun. There was a puzzle to solve, etc. And you think about this on your way to school, like, oh, okay, there's some mode of thinking there that, the thinking could be either inductive, deductive, or abductive, depending on what mood she was in that day. Right? So, but the thing in that is that, all of that, people think that I went directly to med school. No, I didn't. I finished a degree in biology, right? So I entered college at the age of 15.
Yeah.
And there being the biggest thing that people learn, and especially for me, is that when you are alone like that, all decisions redound back to you, and you become an adult very rapidly. Either you adapt and become an adult very quickly, or you don't. Right? And then you have a failure to launch, right? And, I was one of those who wasn't coddled. Right now, parental coddling is so common, helicopter parenting and all this kind of stuff. Yeah. So, and that, those kinds of habits, the kids today, I actually really wonder when they actually sit down and study and take a look and concentrate, because I used to wake up at 4:00 in the morning to study, right?
You did?
Yeah, I did. In college, I used to wake up at 2:00 in the morning. I slept at 7 p.m. But I slept at 2 a.m. Yeah, right? And then the first thing that happened to me that sort of like, it was very funny is that all of my classmates were just like quizzing each other. This was before an exam. And I said, what are you guys doing? They said, we're cramming. And for me, cramming was a foreign word. Cramming what? For the exam. And I didn't know what it meant because, for every time that there was a subject matter, I was always like 2 or 3 chapters ahead of the discussion. And, so it was a foreign notion to me. And I learned to cram only in medicine.
Hey folks, I just wanted to take a quick minute to tell you about something that I've created just for you guys, my listeners. I've created an amazing holiday gift guide for listeners so that you can get the best Black Friday deals on biohacking tools, supplements, and so much more. There are gifts in different price ranges and once a year price drops on your dream health tech. And no one said you can't shop for yourself. So you can get the stuff for friends and family or for yourself. All you've got to do is go to natnidham.com/gift guide for the list of Black Friday deals that you just can't miss.
So,
Well, it's interesting, right? Because you would have been somewhat socially isolated from your classmates, being a different age completely.
Yeah.
It's not like you could go out with them. It's not like you
No.
were going out and partying. So you're kind of on your own ship, riding your own own journey here. And as you said, it was either going to work or not work.
Well, even in med school, I was the youngest in my class. Right?
Again,
because I entered at 18. Right. So, but it was fun. Right. It was fun. For me, if you're choosing something because you are having fun with it and you like it, right? Then it's going to be an easy way forward.
Absolutely.
But if you are getting pressured to do it, as some of my peers were, it's going to be an uphill climb. You lose your you lose your humanness over everything.
You lose the pleasure of it. It's interesting that you bring this up because this really. This even comes into play so much in health. Mm-hmm. That mindset and approach and framing has everything to do with the journey that a person is going to experience, whether it's in their education, as you're talking about, whether it's with a health challenge or a health journey. That framing of it that we do in our minds has everything to do with what our experience.
Yeah, when I first started health optimization medicine, and practice, the framework that you know about which is the balancing of the metabolites in the body to a more youthful age at 21 to 30 years old, right? That kind of mentality didn't exist, right? So, when I said, we take the reins together of your health because you are the expert on how you feel about your body, so instead of, all of us, our, my classmates, everyone else who taught us, we're gods, we tell you what to do. And then and so when suddenly I'm there, it's like, no, I'm not a god, you'll tell me what's happening and we'll check what's really going on, and then let's see. And when they take the intake form, there's nothing about their disease. It's all like, what are your wellness goals? How would you like to feel? How would you like your energy to be? What would you like to be able to do? And all of this stuff. And they say, this is an intake form. Yeah, it is, because it's where we want to move you, right? It's not where we want to treat you. It's where we want to make healthy everything that's going right in your body, so you could actually go and actually help whatever disease that you're having, right? So, so it's an evolutionary point of view. As doctors, we're trained to look at signs and symptoms as signs and symptoms of disease. But in health optimization medicine, we look at those as compensatory mechanisms of the body. This is how the body, what the body does to heal itself. And what I usually give as an example here is a sprain, right? When you have a sprain, you have pain, right? So you avoid pressure on your foot, right? And then it swells. So it's like a cast that's in there, right? And then you get irritable, right? So you have a social isolation that's going on, which helps you heal, right? So what do? We give a patient a crutch so he can move, give him, ibuprofen so there's no pain, right? Yeah. Put it in a cast so he can hobble about. And, how much do we interfere really in these evolutionary pathways, right? But where it actually matters is when you're looking at the cell, right? A cell, when we're looking at a cell, in medicine, we look at it as a diseased cell or not. So for us, they take a look at the cell and say, what's stressing it out, right? Yeah. And the cell, when it responds to stress evolutionarily, has set ways, right? It only knows these 8 different ways. This is how I'm going to respond. Whatever it was psychological, chemical, physical, whatever. This is the only way I know how to respond. Right.
Yeah.
So, and it will respond by molecular inflammation. It will activate your innate immunity, and of course, the key driver. A lot of the key drivers of all of this will be your reactive oxygen species, right? Which is like accumulating. Right. So this is what's called, the cell danger response, which is not taught to us in medical school. And what is the primary driver of this? Not the primary driver are metabolites. These are all the small little things like your B vitamins and your C vitamins and your, and the mercury that you've been eating in your fish and all of those. So all of those are the primary drivers of this cell danger response, right? So we measure those, right? We measure those. And as you know, you've heard me talk, I go.
One of the things I wanted to say to people is when you take a class with Dr. Ted and he tells you, be the cell. What would you do if you were the cell? And you're sitting there going, what? And he's like, well, here you are, you're the cell, and here's all this crap coming at you, and you don't have what you need. So what are you going to do?
Yes.
And it's so smart because you start to really think about things from a different point of view.
And that's where the fight in illness medicine and health optimization medicine usually is, right? It's a difference in perspective. So because, I don't blame illness medicine. I came from there, right? And because the instruments that we had for diagnosis, right, is intended for organs because they were rough. At first, you just had X-rays, etc., and then you developed, all the way out to MRIs, and then now you're able to peer into cellular function and be able to see what's inside. But we're so used to the fact that the doctor asking you what's wrong with you, rather than your healthcare providing asking, okay, what's right with you, and how can we help? What's right with you, right? So. And that's the difference between what we do in health optimization medicine, which is salutogenesis, the root causes of health, right? Everyone, all illness medicine, including functional medicine, this is all root causes of disease, right? But no one actually pays attention to the root causes of health. And that's where you have to shift your point of view from the organ, like the heart, the liver, etc., into the cell itself, because the cell underlies everything else in the body, right?
100%. Yeah. Well, so tell me this, and we're going to go back to this, but before we get too deep into the cell, when did you realize that it was time for a new model? Like what made you, because you, as you said, you come from the traditional medicine model. You were trained as an allopathic physician.
Yes.
So, and it's not surprising to me, given what you said to the nun when you were 4, it's really not surprising to me that at some point you told all the people teaching you medicine, I think I don't think you're right about this. So when was there an event? Like what made you think, wait a minute, we need a whole new perspective here?
That when you get a broken heart, you write all of these beautiful songs and win a Grammy for it. For me, I got so angry, right? I got very angry because I was giving a lecture on mitochondria and I was asking for continuing medical education credits for it. And the professional body said, no, we can't give any credits for those because physicians already know that. There were actually, it was a confluence of factors, right? I came back from training in Paris, where I'm board certified in anti-aging medicine and nutritional medicine. And Nat, the reason why I took nutritional medicine over there is that if I took it over here in the United States, no one would believe me because a lot of people here are fat. So
you're like, what could they possibly know about nutritional medicine?
It's like, really? There was no nutritional medicine training here in the United States at the time that I took it. So it had to be in Paris. But for me, that's my funny story. It's like, why Paris? Well, look at all the Americans. But anyway,
sorry, guys.
But it's true when you land here, you can't help but notice when you've been away for a while and you land here and say, oh my God, it's a land of corpulence, right? But But anyway, and if you say that, it's like, oh, you're fat shaming and all of that. No, actually, I'm health shaming,
Yeah.
because part of my taxes are going to your healthcare. But anyway, that's another issue, right? So for me, coming back, and then I realized that what I learned in Paris is still the same. Like in nutritional medicine, everything was still disease oriented. This set of supplements for this particular, for chronic fatigue syndrome, this set for this, for this, for this. And I said, no, there has to be a better way of doing this. And then, I got sick and tired of seeing all of these articles coming up in the magazines that are being read by all these people, right? They will go, okay, is vitamin E good for me? Is vitamin D good for me? Is vitamin A good for me? It's like, why don't you just measure those? We can measure it now. Why don't you measure it and then see? And then I said, if we are really going to have a clinical practice that's devoted to health, not to disease, there must be a way of putting it in a framework where all of these biohacks that are around, your red light, your blue light, your this, your sauna, your NAD, your this, your that. It's like, everyone's just doing it without a framework in their heads. And so I said, let's do this. I said, why don't we shift the perspective from the organ to the cell, since the cell underlies all the tissues in the body, and let's take care of the fundamental cell. The one that has a nucleus, mitochondria, cytoplasm, peroxisomes, cell membrane, and it's networked, right? We take care of the network because it communicates, with everything around it. And that's a big thing there, is that in medicine, we don't normally think about systems, right? Because heart is a heart, the liver is a liver. In fact, I was convincing an endocrinologist once to join me in hormone balancing, right? And he said, oh, I don't like that. He said, you're thinking of too many things. He said, if I see a thyroid case, I just want to do the thyroid. If I want to see a diabetes case, I just want to do the pancreas. This is like, okay, all right. And that's where they started to hate me, because I started to accuse illness medicine of intellectual slothing. It's typical. but
Intellectual slothing. That's your word today, guys.
So anyway, and that was the genesis. It's like, it made me very uncomfortable that we already have the instruments in the laboratory now. They've existed for 50 years, and they've been brought up out of the lab slowly. So what we used to memorize in biochemistry, like the Krebs cycle and everything else, and they give us examples about that, we can measure all of those now. All of those intermediates we can measure, all of those things that impede, the Krebs cycle for energy production, for example. We can measure now as, the mercury, in class, so say vitamin B1, B2, B3, polyphobic acid, magnesium, and B5. So these are the kinds of things that we used to just memorize, and therefore it's not in our minds as doctors that we can test for this now, and we can, right? And sadly, there is no specialty that does that. Right. And the one major thing that medical education or health education lacks is that we have anatomy, physiology, biochemistry, where anatomy and physiology meet. And then, okay, here's what's wrong with your car. Right. Yeah. Instead of, and there is no part that says, okay, this is how your car is going to run smoothly. Right. Your tire pressure may be a little bit uneven. Right? You may have a low windshield washer fluid, all of these things collectively.
It's the little things.
It's the little things. How do you make your body? The make and model of this is a Ford Model T, as I like to lecture, right? And we built a Lamborghini world. Our bodies are not Lamborghinis, folks. This was built for a time for hunter-gatherers systems. So we tried to approximate, not by going back to the hunter-gatherer mode, but remedying it through science and technology and all the things that we've learned, right? For example, when you're looking at light as a phototoxic, like for example, we're children of sunlight, right? So you have now, lighting systems that can simulate a day all together with all the frequencies for daylight, right? And then slowly turns into nighttime and so on. So we can approximate these things. You have air filters and water filters and so on. So, although there is urgency because we have a limited carrying capacity of the earth, right, for humans, because we use a lot of the earth's resources, we also can mitigate this, right? So if you're lucky, this is like my favorite question to physicians who question me. It's like, oh no, they can just eat that. Because I had an argument once with another doctor. It's like, no, Ted, they should take their antibiotics first and then they'll take your vitamins. So,
they should take their what first?
Their antibiotics first.
And
and then they take their vitamins. And I said, actually, you have that backwards, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, how are your antibiotics going to affect these things that actually have been there, seen by evolution for a long time, right? Mm-hmm. You don't even know. At that time, I knew that she was going to bomb the gut microbiota, but that was outside of her system, right?
Yeah.
Because that's what we're good at in illness medicine, is acute infections and acute trauma. We insist on using the same things, the same techniques, etc., for things that actually do not need those types of interventions, right? So instead of a mode where you want to cure or treat disease, we are in a mode where we want to balance the imbalances of the body. Right? Because those imbalances, when they get severe, those will actually lead to disease, right?
Yeah.
And that's a dynamic balance. It goes on and on and on. And people say, what's your goal? I said, the goal is actually optimal health. So it has to be done over and over and over. It's not to prevent disease. That's preventive medicine. That's different, right? Because health itself should be a specialty, right? How do we run this optimally, right? Finally, we need a way in order to learn how to run the body optimally instead of just preventing it from breaking down or fixing it when it's already broken down. Right?
Well, and I think that the cellular approach that you take, and for me, it's like it's from one of the lectures. I have the Krebs cycle like emblazoned into my brain, and lots of other different pathways. And those little numbers and letters in the spaces between the stages, which is B6 and magnesium, B3, B1, B2, zinc, whatever the case may be. And then like the big black mercury or lead. And so if any one of those little things is missing or the wrong thing is in the wrong place, you can medicate all you want. You're not going to fix that cell, and the cells, and the cell can work it. I think a lot of what you're teaching is the body can work its way out of improper function if we give it the tools that it needs. And then you have you've initiated a cascade that we don't even sometimes know about. We've just kind of set it free and off it goes.
Yes. When I was training, I got lucky with mentors, right? I just had, my elder sister told me this. It's like, you are the luckiest guy who ever got, mentors. Because in the Philippines, I was mentored by the guy who started the whole neurology department. He's like this is a guy, the guy who started interventional neuroradiology in the country, the woman who started pharmacology, toxicology in the country. So these are like the pioneers, right? So I was.
Those are your mentors?
Yeah, these are my mentors. And then when I came here to the United States, my mentor was the guy who started the entire field of medical informatics and shoved me into artificial intelligence research. In 1988, can you imagine that? I was telling people I've survived 2 artificial intelligence winters already.
Oh my God.
for this. But he was the guy who started it. And then when I started to learn about finance, because I knew nothing about finance, Natalie, the guy who started the whole socially responsible investing movement was my mentor. Right? So I didn't realize this, that I was so lucky, right, to get all of this. And I said, it's time for me, and this was inadvertent on my part to pioneer something like this. But, the medicine in the United States has already marched off a cliff, right? It's already falling and fallen desperately. And I said, in chaos theory, right? In the bifurcation point, or the fluttering of the butterfly in the desert of Sonora causes a hurricane in the Pacific, which is the logo of Home Hope, right? You could see that there's a butterfly pulling out the O of home, right? And
Right.
we're hoping that we could be that flapping of that butterfly's wings, just a little change to move the
Mhm.
needle, and then maybe we could go somewhere else, right? We could take a look not only at my definition of health, which is health equals A plus B plus C, right? A is absence of disease plus the balance between
Mhm.
anabolic, which is things that build, and catabolic processes, things that destroy in the body, according to the
Mhm.
C life cycle of the organism, right? And therefore, optimization becomes easier, right? Because then you move the metabolism back to the golden period, right? So it's very, in concept, it's very simple, but when you take a look at it as a clinical specialty, you have to take a look at it. You have to take a look at it in a network format, right? Because when you're
Mhm.
touching, say, you're touching vitamin B6, then you're actually touching other parts of the network. And what I liked about what you said, Nat, really, is that I was going to give you an example of this is like a kind of like a grand rounds case now for me in terms of I had this big time patient, right, who collapsed and was brought to the ER. And since he was my patient, then I already sent all the metabolomics tests to the emergency room, pointing them, I won't tell you that what it is, pointing them to exactly what had happened, right? It was ignored, totally ignored. He had 5 doctors, right? 2 neurologists, one for cognitive decline and one for muscle weakness. He had a cardiologist for his arrhythmia, a
Mhm.
dermatologist, right? Because he had skin itchiness, and he had an endocrinologist. Okay. So
Lots of
these,
ologists.
huh?
Lots of ologists.
Lots of
All the
ologists,
ologists.
and
Yeah.
all of them had different diagnoses for the patient, right? So
Mhm.
the cardiologist was already beginning to talk about ablating the arrhythmia, right? Uh,
Yeah.
and so on. And this was in the Philippines. I had to fly back. Right? I had to fly back from Washington D.C. and and I said no. I said, so when I visited him in the hospital, the cardiologist was there, and I pointed out to him, this is actually an acute exacerbation, right, of subchronic mercury toxicity. Right. So
Oh,
all the while, the
yeah.
weakness, the weakness in the muscles, the cognitive decline, the arrhythmia, the skin lesions, the abnormalities in this endocrine function, those were all because he was a pescatarian. He ate only fish, right? And the fish was
Yeah.
laden with mercury, and that was his mercury source, right? And so this was a very much a teaching moment for my students too, right?
No
Because
kidding.
they saw the charts and said, like, holy fuck, all of these specialists with different diagnoses, different drugs, different modes. And then when I wove it together for them, like, the cardiologist is so nice. He said, and young, he said, Dr. Ted, then I have no more role here because this is the correct diagnosis. The arrhythmia is not from anything else. But, I said, are you going to do the detoxification? I said, yeah, I will do the detoxification of the patient. But this is the damage of all of your interventions so far, right? The drugs, the
Well, because
everything. So,
well, because they're all coming in from the top, right?
yeah.
They're all saying you need this beta blocker or whatever drug and a statin and a this and a skin thing and an immune system modifier, whatever it is. It's really about which direction you're looking at it from, right? Like, are you
Yes.
looking at its source, or are you looking at the symptom, the expression?
No. No,
No,
because
that's too bad.
drugs and procedures actually earn money. What we do
Yeah.
requires a lot of time, and that's why the people I train, I tell them, don't be shy to bill for your time,
Hmm.
because this
Yeah.
requires a lot of thinking. right? A lot of
Yeah.
correlating, a lot of taking a look at the network and what the network's doing, right?
Yeah.
And all the way from very simple things, not like here in the U.S., for example, when I see people in the winter months, right, where they over abuse the zinc candies, and then you could see their copper levels actually drop severely, and they start manifesting very, very, you wouldn't even notice it, if you were not looking for it, but you could see this mild symptoms already of copper deficiency because they were taking in too much zinc. Because zinc will actually, shove your copper level out of your body, right?
What are the symptoms of copper deficiency?
Oh,
And is it really deficiency or is it zinc toxicity? Like, is it because it's a
both.
balance?
It's both. It's both. You'll be getting both, right? You get a little bit of zinc toxicity. You already know that you have zinc toxicity, or at least the beginnings of it. If your taste starts becoming metallic, for Christ's sakes, it's like, is that not even? It's not even obvious to you that why is my taste like this? It's just one of the things like, oh, maybe I just ate something, and then when you point it out to them, like, hey, you're overtaking this, and then you show them in their metabolome testing, like, hey, look, here's your zinc, here's your copper, here's your this and that, and they go, holy shit, and they stop the habit, right? And that's why I am that's why they started this fucking lifestyle medicine in illness medicine, right? But I asked them, exactly what do you base your lifestyle advice on? What's your objective measure? You can't give this a pieces of advice and say, oh, your objective measure is the disappearance of disease. That's not right, right? That's not right, because that's illness medicine. When you're giving lifestyle, you're actually affecting the entire individual. Then you're affecting all cells. So your measure should be intracellular, or within the cellular network. And that's why I was lecturing almost 10 years ago. It's like, what a shame when patients come to us. They would have a lifestyle recommendation from a cardiologist, from the diabetologist, from a neurologist, and they come to me and they have this, what the fuck? They have 3 different recommendations for 3 different diseases, right?
Yeah.
And whereas if you go and take a look at what the cell needs and so on, it's like, okay, here are your supplemental recommendations. Here are your nutritional recommendations, right? Because sometimes you'll be taking care of the gut, sealing the gut, and so on. Here are your and here are your nutritional recommendations, and then here are your behavior and lifestyle recommendations. Because if a person, you see this very often, where people don't sleep, right? They will binge watch Netflix, over and over. And I thought this was just for young people. Like, holy cannoli. I see a lot of my older patients, who I love, by the way, they're over 60 and they're binge watching Netflix until 4 a.m. I said,
100%. Or they're stuck on Instagram, right?
Oh, I know that so well. Yeah, the retirees are doom scrolling all the time.
Yeah.
And it's just like, man, I said, I see their world collapsing when I see that. Their cognitive world is collapsing because all they see is that, right? Rather than actually engaging. I see it. Yeah, engaging in the world.
Yeah, I see that. And there's, it has such a negative impact on their health, both cognitively and physically, because it seems it's a little bit like the cell, right? It seems so simple, but when you're doom scrolling, you're sitting. You're not moving. You're sinking into despair because the algorithm is now feeding you what it believes you're interested in. And so that's all you see. So now you have no hope that anything's ever going to get better. And your world starts to close in. It's a really, it's a very horrible thing. But one thing I wanted to talk about a little bit is you talked to us a lot in the course about how you move people into action when they first come to you as a patient. So the first thing that you've talked about right now is getting insight from the patient of, how do you want to live? What do you want to do? What are your goals? Where do you want to end up with this? Like, what's going to move you? Because they're the ones that are going to tell you, right? But you also have a very you have a great twist because you're going to sit there, you're going to go through all the labs, you're going to look at all the things, and there's probably, 10 different things you could address, but you find the pain point.
Yeah.
And I would love you to talk to the audience about this, because in some ways people will be, oh, that's terrible. But on the other hand, it's like, if people don't believe there's something broke that they can fix, they're not going to change.
Yes. Because
But
that's the point of view, right? So in the course of practice, Nat, I've always taught you guys that compliance is 80% of your success, right? No matter how nice your protocol is for your patient, you won't achieve anything unless your patient follows, I'll address your question shortly, but I had this patient like for 6 years and nothing would go, right? By, and by the fifth year, his values, his blood sugar started optimizing, his fasting insulin started optimizing. He had GERD, and now he is able to sleep horizontally. His son even challenged me, if he can make my father sleep horizontally, without any pain, etc., and I'll believe you. And he started to sleep horizontally, and started going to the gym and so on. And then I said, "Oh, what's changed?" He said, "Dr. Ted, I just found out the real secret of working with you." And I said, "What is that?" Just to follow your protocol. Because he's like doctor adjacent. He manages doctors, he knows everything, he knows a lot about diseases and so on. So he keeps on adjusting the protocol until nothing actually happens. And for me, I already knew that's what he was doing. Okay, have your fun, right? And then when it finally hit him, it's like, oh, okay, this is what needs to get done. But so you find all these different things that actually motivate them to comply, right? So the first thing that I do is actually show them their toxicity panel. Like, okay, here are your poisons, right? Here's what's poisoning you. And it's like, oh my God, and then they're suddenly alert, right? They're goaded into action and say, okay, how can I deal with this? Right? How can I deal with this, etc., etc. And then you say, okay, if you take alpha lipoic acid, it's actually one of the things that we already are giving for your blood sugar. It will also be your natural chelator for your mercury, and then suddenly you're hooking up a lot of the things that the client now needs, there. The other thing, the most difficult part, Nat, is behavioral change, right?
Yes. Oh, for sure.
So for behavioral change, essentially, when you give them a very strict elimination diet or a very strict eating thing, they won't follow. So what I do is I ask them to commit to me at least a 12-hour feeding window, and a 12-hour fasting window, because in 12 hours can assure me of mitochondrial biogenesis. Right? At least that's what the studies show. And then you ask them, it's like, no, doctor, I can't follow that kind of diet, but can you commit to me this time schedule for eating? Oh, I can do that, no problem. So you catch them at where they're actually willing to meet with you. And then after a month or so, they feel better, and say, what else can I do? So the thing that I tell them is, my goal here is to get you addicted to the feeling of wellness, right? So that when you get out of it, you know what it's like, right? What it feels like. And then like your recovery period in exercise, you recover quickly, right? You know what balance feels like in a bike, right? So when you fall, you know how to get back in balance right away. So there are many of these things that you can use to hook the behavior of people, but you got to the people that I accept into my practice have a level of discipline that they really want to feel better. right? They really want
Yeah,
to be at the
for
top
sure.
of their game. And some of them really just want to compete, right? So I have athletes, I have CEOs who want to out CEO other CEOs, you know. like my
Whatever
piss,
it takes.
like my piss is higher than yours or something like that. But it's fine,
Yeah, yeah,
right? It's fine.
yeah.
It's for me a healthy type of competition. But the thing is that not emphasizing that health, right? Optimized health with time, right? Is your true wealth. It's not time that's your true wealth, right? The amount of time that you have,
Mm.
you can never guarantee that, right? But having optimal health with time with you, that is your true wealth, right? So I've had patients who have told me, oh, I have better things to do with my money rather than spend it on my health, and those are the non-ideal cases, right?
Yeah.
And I have very sad stories about those because a couple
Mhm.
of years later something happens to them, and there's nothing you can do about it anymore. Um, but for me, the first thing that I do when I sit them down is, introduce themselves to me. Hi, I'm diabetic. No. Your name, please. It's not your identity.
Yeah.
um, and I said, we'll set down your disease, right? Let's set down your disease and let's take a look. Let's take a look at what your goals are, right? Um, would you like to have more sex with your partner? Would you like to have that's that's a big carrot, a big carrot for them,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, uh, I was once asked when I was starting this whole field, right? It's like, Dr. Ted, what are you marketing? And this was just like point blank, right? It was just being asked in public, what are you marketing? I said, I market sex, youth, and vitality.
That's what people are after, right?
Yeah,
Connection. I mean, you could replace sex with connection, but
yeah,
that is
yeah.
ultimately what human is looking
Vanity
for.
works and sex works. So you have to put, and poisoning works. So you could actually hook in there and pull them in that way, and then make them realize that there are all of these aspects of their health that are actually better addressed, by this different point of view. You look at yourself
Yeah.
as healthy, and look at your disease as basically a deviation from your health.
There's one topic that we both agreed we were going to talk about today. I studied on it, you studied on it, and I refer to it as the bomboniere. If anybody's been to an Italian wedding, you always leave the Italian wedding with the bomboniere. You get a gift that you
Yes.
get to take home that you can use. And sometimes it's a chachka you don't need, but whatever. This is not a chachka, and you do need it. We're going to dive into vitamin D.
Is this lube?
No, not lube. I'm not giving you lube. No, get your mind out of the gutter. Come back to me.
Hey, that's not gutter.
You come back to me. Often you started at the beginning of the podcast, you talked about optimizing people's micronutrient levels and markers to when they were 21 to 30 years old.
Yes.
So let's hone in on one of them that I think we both agree is a critical component of health, that it seems like it comes in and out and in out in and out, and it's vitamin D. And when we're optimizing people back to when they were 21 to 30 years old, and we look at vitamin D, what does that look like? And then let's talk a little bit about the importance of this vitamin, which is really not a vitamin.
Yeah, the optimization of vitamin D is the one that's different for me, right? That's where we optimize to, instead of 21 to 30, we optimize to evolutionarily derived values. And what do I mean by that? So, the values are based on the Maasai and Hadzabe tribes in Africa, right? Where chronic diseases are rare or non-existent. And their values are between 50 to 100 nanograms per mil, right? So when you're looking at that kind of values, you see that even in my practice, that when my patients hit above 60 nanograms per mil, even those with 3 or 4 diseases stacked on to their history, they seem secondary, right? They seem easier to manage because their D levels are so optimized, right? And there are many reasons for that. Many reasons for that. Of course, the vitamin D itself is older than us as a species, right? It's estimated to be between 650 to 750 million years old. We are 250.
So how is that possible? How is it possible that a receptor that we have is older than we are?
Because the initial organisms, where we grew from evolutionarily, right, already had them. Okay. In fact, right? Before it was unicellular before we became multicellular, right? So, and in fact, that is already touching on the biggest finding that people are still not realizing, right? From the 2000s on, there has been a big finding about vitamin D that people should really pay attention and slap themselves and say, the way we think about vitamin D now has changed. Before, vitamin D was in the purview of nephrologists, right? So it was like, oh, it's for calcium, right? So how is it, right? So the sun shines on your skin. Your skin has what's called 7-deoxycholesterol, which doesn't come from your diet. It's synthesized by your skin, right? And the epidermis. And then that becomes now your pre-vitamin D, right? So it binds a receptor. It's activated in the liver. So skin, then activated in the liver is process called hydroxylation, right? And then it's activated now in your kidney, right? At your mitochondria, right? And the inner membrane of mitochondria, it's called 1-alpha hydroxylase, right? That is the enzyme. Now activates it to 125 D3, right? So there are two things that are important here. So your measure of your total vitamin D should be 25 hydroxy D, right? Because that is a total of what's synthesized from your skin and what you actually take in as either supplement, right? Or from mushrooms and other sources from plants, right? That have it. But then this is hydroxylated once in the liver. That's a common pathway. Now it used to be that we only knew that this is called, for those of you who are snobs in terms of what the pathway is. This is called the canonical pathway, right?
Okay.
Skin and diet to the liver to the kidneys. Activation, right? And then it regulates your calcium, right? It regulates your calcium. And so it's sensitive to what's called the parathormone, the hormones that regulate, right? That regulate calcium in your body. So this canonical pathway is responsible for calcium regulation inside the body, right? So this is the human itself. However, the big finding is that vitamin D, right, the 25-hydroxy D is not only activated in the kidney. So suddenly the kingdom of the nephrologist is gone and says we have actually extra renal activation, meaning non-kidney cells can actually activate this. And this is a huge implication for vitamin D because when it's in the canonical pathway, we only think of it activating the genes, right? The genes called the a vitamin D receptor element, right? VDRE, which actually requires vitamin A, retinoid X receptor. People don't emphasize that, but retinoid X receptor, which is a part of the binding for vitamin D, that's why you have to make sure that your clients, have adequate vitamin A source, right? Because otherwise they won't be making this RXR receptor. So that's a classic pathway. Okay, it activates the genes and it participates in over 200 different pathways, right, in the body. That's fantastic, right? It's responsible for the deposition and removal of bone. And including your teeth, because your teeth are bone, right? My sister's a dentist, and when I met her. Yeah. And I made her aware of this. And then she really started getting very strict about her patients' vitamin D levels. And the results are fantastic, right? Because of that. Now, that's the canonical pathway. Okay, everybody knows, that's what everybody knows, right? But what I want everybody to know is this non-canonical pathway or alternative pathway, which does not necessarily have to do with activating the genes, right? It has a direct effect on the messaging of the cells. So, what do I mean by that? So, all of the cells in your body have mitochondria except the red blood cells, right? Because the
Mm-hmm.
red blood cells lose their mitochondria as a benefit for us to get hemoglobin. They give up their iron for hemoglobin, right? So, so you can imagine then that all the cells in the body have the capacity to actually convert your 25 hydroxy D from the liver into the active form.
The 125.
The
Yeah.
125. So it's not just in the kidney now.
It's
It can
full
be
body.
activated by everything. And they have verified this, it's in the skin, right? It's in the skin cells, it's in the prostate, it's in the lung, it's in your macrophages, and so on. So this is actually quite, revolutionary in terms of thinking, because now, they're still actively studying, right? But the core is that, hey, it's still activated in the inner membrane of your mitochondria, right? It's just that the mitochondria doesn't have to be in your proximal tubule of the kidney. It's in your macrophages. It's in everywhere in your cells that have mitochondria, right? And this is why it has been, there's studies about vitamin D for cancer, vitamin D for autoimmune disease, vitamin D because these are what's called the pleiotropic effects, the effects that could not be explained. These are all over the body effects, the effects that could not be explained, right, by just activating the VDRE,
In the kidney.
Yeah.
So let me ask you a question. So in genetics, sometimes, so I hope you guys are enjoying the geekiness of this conversation because I'm fascinated. So hopefully you're with me. In genetics, sometimes there are people where they talk about their VDRE gene pathway is downregulated. So their conversion of 25-OH to 125 is not optimal. And because we only measure 25-OH, you could be getting kind of this backup where you're not converting enough to the 125. Is that because they're only measuring it? Okay, you're laughing.
You
Yes.
are actually pointing out a major aspect on vitamin D studies, right? This is called the vitamin D paradox, right? So why is it that Black people, right,
Mm-hmm.
who may have downregulated VDRE,
Yeah,
still
I
have
do. Yeah.
still have very strong bones, strong teeth, right, and do not exhibit any of the D deficiencies that you normally see? And that's because there may be it's several factors, right? Because vitamin D, well, you can have a gene polymorphism, right?
Mm-hmm.
A gene polymorphism that although they produce less vitamin D, the receptors are actually more receptive to
Right.
to it. The second is that they may have better absorption in their intestines. The third is they may have a faster way of activating, right? Or they have a more efficient messaging system. So these are all the factors that contribute to what's called the vitamin D paradox. And vitamin D paradox is still actively being solved, right? Or why do we have this paradox? And different people will have different reasons for why they will be manifesting that. So it's not just genetic, right? So it may be functional in itself.
And so would that change the optimal range that we're looking for? Or would that?
For me, exactly, right? That will change the optimal range. But for me, the whole my basis, right? My basis for this is like it's always an evolutionary way of looking at it,
Mhm,
right?
mhm,
So you
mhm.
have to land on something that you can agree on. And here's another fact that I said I would talk to you about. Everything was going fine. They were endorsing higher values, etc. And suddenly they withdrew the recommendation for testing or screening for vitamin D levels, right? And they said, okay, only those who are not healthy and are high risk. How do you say what's healthy and what's high risk, right? So
Mhm.
what's a healthy child, what's a high risk female, and so on. But I do understand their point of view. I think they swung too far into the
To the
woke
other
side
side.
of things because there were many conflicting studies as regards the vitamin D paradox. So you touch
Right.
on a very important thing in there, and it's still a source of confusion until now. But for me,
Interesting.
what I still recommend is although the Institute of Medicine, they're now called something else, National Academy of Medicine, whatever. There are three different sets of recommendations. We're still debating until now.
Yeah.
What's the and it may turn out to be very different for people. We already know it's different for people in different latitudes, right? So,
Yeah.
or different skin color. In fact, for the audience here who would like to know how much sun exposure they would like to have between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m., where the UVB is highest, right? For you, and what latitude you live in, and so on, and when those UVB rays disappear, there's a free app that you could
D
actually go.
Dminder.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
Dminder.
And you could actually take a look at that. And I would encourage people to do that because you've heard this story, Nat. I'm a tropical boy with tropical genes, and goddamn, I have dark skin, right? So when I first moved to the United States, to live here permanently, it was just, going in and out here was no problem. But when you start living here permanently and experiencing the winter, I got into severe seasonal affective disorder, right?
You did.
Yeah, I did. I was like going into fetal position. I wouldn't like to get out, and so on. It was just awful, right? And then a friend of mine actually moved away. It's in fact my classmate from med school called me up, and I said, "Where are you?" I said, "I'm in Hawaii. I moved away because I have severe seasonal affective disorder." And I said, and Hawaii has been very helpful. I said, and this was like, probably more than 2 decades ago. And she said, "Dad, take a look at vitamin D lamps, and so on." So, and that's where I actually started looking at vitamin D lamps. But my D levels were so severely depressed, right? So I had D lamps, and I was also taking 50,000 IU of vitamin D 3 times a week, which gave me diarrhea. Between depression and diarrhea, I'd rather take diarrhea, right? But now,
Yeah.
for those who are severely depleted, they can still recommend up to 50,000 IU once a week, right? For 8 weeks.
Yeah.
For those with seasonal affective disorder, it's still being prescribed. Not one of my friends who's a psychiatrist actually um, down in Florida said that I have this entire ward of patients, but they have the roof of their ward had a retracting a roof, right? So they could get
Yeah.
sunlight, right?
Yeah.
And he just said that just 2 weeks of just retracting that at noon for just 15, 20 minutes, etc. He just observed this behavioral change among all the patients, right? I'm not
Mhm.
saying we do this, right? What I'd like to say is that we as organisms are yoked to the sun, right? And we are actually, our cycles are yoked to the sun rising, the sun setting, and so on. And the light is actually therapeutic for us.
Yeah.
In very many ways, like being out in nature. I have patients. It's like they're taught by their dermatologist, don't go out in the sun, right? And so if you do, go before 10 o'clock or after 3 o'clock. It's like
And have
you
an
don't, yeah,
umbrella.
you don't
Yeah.
get any of that. But what you can do is you can actually wear a baseball cap. I have a story about this one where I had a high powered CFO, female and la la la, and she was a smoker, right? And
She's a smoker?
She was a smoker, yeah. And she had, despite everything that she was doing with her lifestyle, right? Very stressful, very, one with the boys, and so on. And I look at her profile, it's like, this is fantastic. I looked at her vitamin D, 63 nanograms. Right? And it's like, okay, this is like another point in my data plot, right? That over 60 and it really looks good. And it's actually quite funny. I said, what do you do? Oh, Dr. Ted, they don't allow us to smoke in the building. So at noon, I put on a baseball cap, just as you said. But I walk around the building for about 10, 15 minutes, sleeveless, smoking a stick of cigarette in the sunlight.
Oh my God.
You see, for fair-skinned people, 10 to 15 minutes of sunlight is about 1,000 IU of free vitamin D, right? You don't have to supplement much. But unlike the recommendations where you don't have to check if you're healthy, I always recommend that you check if you're healthy. Recommendations change, of course. There are different recommendations for children. There are different recommendations for pregnant and lactating women. And all of this stuff. But the thing that you can always remember is like, well, for children, let them fucking play in the sunlight, right? And if you're pregnant, go expose yourself in the sunlight. It doesn't hurt.
Yeah.
And it's like here we are arguing about, supplementing, et cetera, and what are the effects if you're over supplemented and so on and so forth. We don't even study what are the effects when you're actually in the sunlight at 12 noon. So, it's like we seem to be asking the wrong questions. We're looking at supplementation right away when there's something free, right? So,
well, yeah. I mean, in some places, but where I live, there's most of the year that free thing's not available. So, I do think there's lamps, like there's devices that give you that UVB, so you can make your own vitamin D.
I've always marveled. Canadians are beautiful people. I wonder it's because of the, lack of sunlight or, something else.
All right. Well, I have another question for you. So let's say somebody's getting out there they're at the right latitude. They're getting their vitamin D from the sun, or they're getting their supplement, or they're doing what I do. I've got a lamp called the Mitolux. It gives me an exact prescription of vitamin D based on with blue light based on my skin tone. But
you mentioned something else too to me, where I said before I was trying these vitamin D lotions that were like totally thick, and you said there are new lotions now that are just really great. Those are nice too. Right?
Yeah, there's vitamin D cream, but what about vitamin K? Because when I went to nutrition school, they beat it into us. If you have a client who's taking vitamin D, especially in large doses, must give them vitamin K. And I would argue vitamin A as well, because the vitamin A and D, what you were mentioning earlier, have a balancing effect with each other. But the vitamin K is a big one. And I feel like we're missing that with people who have the lamps. Now we're getting the vitamin D. We're not getting the K from our diet.
All right. I'll address it in two parts, because one, I think I forgot to mention the big thing about vitamin D. It's the hormone named vitamin D, right? So vitamin D acts more like a hormone than it does a vitamin. So whenever I lecture in it, in fact, my lecture in it, Nat, was called "To D or Not to D." No longer the question.
Of course it was.
To D or not to D, no longer the question. That was the title. And I just put it in people's heads that this is a hormone, much like melatonin is a hormone. You look at these things and you go, because they're labeled in your head, they're supplements, they're not hormones, they are hormones. The second thing about vitamin D is that it's fat soluble. So when you take your vitamin D, make sure that you actually are eating a fatty meal or have some fat in your meal. Otherwise, you'll have very poor absorption. There are, A, D, E, K. Vitamins A, D, E, and K are fat-soluble vitamins. So make sure that when you take these vitamins, say, for example, you're measured in your metabolomics test that these are low for you, then take them with a little fat, right? and then for the question about vitamin K, so there are two types of vitamin K, right? There is a K1, which is phyloquinone, and K2, which is menaquinone, right? And K2 is divided into several. There's MK4, MK7. The MK7 is the one that's longer lasting. Now, what does it do? Right? So when you're looking at vitamin K, you are actually looking at its calcium, the calcium pathway. All right. So what does menaquinone or MK7 and MK4 and MK7 specifically do? And the preferred is MK7, right? What it does is that it actually leads the calcium to your bone because they produce a molecule called osteocalcin, right? And the osteocalcin is like a homing beacon for your calcium, right, to get into the bone. Okay, and that's why otherwise, if you take vitamin D and calcium at the same time, it may deposit in your intestines, in your blood vessel walls, and all of these things that you don't want to calcify start calcifying. Right, so you don't want that. That's why you separate your intake of D from your intake of calcium. Right, so you separate but your D has to be taken with menaquinone or MK7, so that there's actually already a homing signal, right, for the calcium. So when you do take your calcium, say 2 hours later or 3 hours later, there's already a homing device for them to go. Now, I would like to put in here like the new information that we discussed earlier, right? Is that so? This is just like a big fractal of what's going on inside the cell. Vitamin D is the mitochondria inside the cell is the cell's calcium sink. So it's like the bone of the cell. So it's where the calcium is actually processed. So calcium regulation inside the cell is actually done by your mitochondria, right? So if you can imagine that vitamin D is actually activated in the inner membrane of mitochondria, you could see then now all the studies are pointing to the role of your vitamin D3 in the calcium regulation of your mitochondria, right? Because too much calcium and your cell will burst, right? So because calcium is a signaling molecule, right? So these are pathways. So you could see there what we're doing in the body, it's also doing inside the cell. And that's how pleiotropic vitamin D is. And that's why for me, it's always an endless sense of wonder of what it does. Like this thing has been here before I even existed. And this is what I call MRGs, they called master regulatory genes, right? They've been there even before. And so the body has conserved them. And I'm keeping personally, for just for my sake and my interest, and if anyone is interested in joining me, to actually make a list of these master regulatory genes, those are still very important because we always take a look at what's in here now, but we never take a look at what's in here that's been conserved, when we were not yet a species, right? And why? Yeah. And vitamin D is one of the oldest ones. The receptor gene is one of the oldest ones that we actually have in there. That's why I have a lot of respect for it. For the way you have a lot of respect for your older people, or the elders who know a lot more than you do. Yes. Despite the fact that it's kind of stupid, blah blah blah. But you know what? They always have a lot more wisdom because they have lived a longer life than you have and have seen a lot more. It's the same with genes. Right?
Yeah. So. And vitamin D it maybe not sexy, but it definitely runs the show. There's also interactions, and I don't know if we want to get into it for too long here, but vitamin D, the last thing I wanted to say about this hormone, and let's stop calling it a vitamin, let's call it a hormone, the D3 hormone, because it also interacts with testosterone, thyroid, and also cortisol, right? Yes. So as a hormone, it actually interacts with all of these different other hormones.
Yes. So this is very important for those illness medicine doctors out there, especially, or if you have clients who are on various medications, right? You have to take a look at the following medication classes. See, I told you I prepared, Nat.
I knew you prepared.
So if
Like,
your patient is
if you need
on
to. Yeah.
prednisone or dexamethasone, right, it can decrease intestinal absorption, right, of your vitamin D, right? So it may require to, like, for those example who are on autoimmune, for rejection drugs for organ transplants, for example, right? They
Yeah.
may need really high doses of vitamin D. Those are on anticonvulsants, like having seizures, like phenytoin or memazepine, right? Um, it increases the destruction of hydroxy D, and it also decreases the hydroxylation, right? And
Hmm.
it is highly associated. So if your children are on seizure meds, have their D levels taken, because this is highly associated with osteomalacia or softening of the bone, right?
Mm.
There's actually a
Hmm.
funny a story here that has nothing to do with these meds, but UK tried to bring back its levels of vitamin D to 20 nanograms per mil. And suddenly, yes, they did. And suddenly they started having increasing incidences, and then a lot of incidences of softening of the bone, right? Adult
Wow.
softening of the bone. And that's what it will do to you, right? So, and then if you're an antifungal, right? Ketoconazole, clotrimazole, right? It inhibits alpha hydroxylase. And then here's a common one: cholesterol lowering statins, right? It decreases intestinal absorption and decreases hepatic synthesis, and they may require higher supplementation. So if your patient is on statins, take a look at the vitamin D levels. All right, weight loss drugs, especially those that actually make you poop fat, right? Decreases and then those that are on HIV meds, right? Tenofovir, etc., right? It decreases the hydroxylation, right, of that.
Yeah.
And then, okay, and another one is very common: antacids and proton pump inhibitors, your Zantac,
Mm-hmm.
your omeprazole, your aluminum hydroxide, right? This is associated with fracture risk, right? Because it decreases calcium absorption, decreases intestinal pH, and then you have loss of that. So, for me, we ignore the skeleton because it just always props us up until you are of age, when you are postmenopausal and you're coming to me, and I could say recover with hormone balancing, with estrogen, progesterone, recover about 20% of that. But the rest of that, I will have to put you on weight bearing exercises, and I will have to put you, rather than put you on Residronate and all of these drugs, right? I'd
Mm-hmm.
like you to be able to recover some of those calcium first, and put them back in your body with adequate levels of vitamin D, adequate exercise, right? And
And vitamin K.
Yeah,
Don't
and
forget
vitamin
K.
K. So the K actually, my general rule of thumb is about 100 micrograms per 5,000 IU, right? So if you're giving
Okay.
2,500 IU, then you can give 50 micrograms. So it's just a rule of thumb, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Those are. Remember, when you're looking at K, you're looking at osteocalcin, you're looking at calcium metabolism, right?
Got it.
That's a systemic thing, and it's very important, right?
Very
One of the
important.
things that you have to look at right now really is that, with all of these things that people are taking and so on, that's why there are risk assessments now for, suddenly there's calcification of the of blood vessels, calcification of intestines, etc., and that's because of the lack of vitamin K2, right, in the
Just
system.
as
Yeah,
important.
yeah.
All right, Dr. Ted, I'm pulling us out of the vitamin D
Mm,
rabbit hole.
yes.
We're gonna bring our conversation. I mean, we could keep going for hours. We know this, but I think we're gonna start to wind up our conversation. And to do that, I want to talk very briefly. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, and you can answer them. I need you to give me like little snapshots here. So, walk me through a typical day in your life, from wake up to wind down. What are those key things that you do every single day that are non-negotiable for you?
When I wake up, the first thing I do is I smile. and I say, I get to live another day.
Gratitude.
What fun am I going to have today? Right?
Okay. That's
Okay.
number one.
Right. And the second thing, of course, is meditation. Right. And meditation is not only for myself, but for all of the people around me and my patients. I meditate on my patients. I do a meta meditation. I wish them good health and so on and so forth and whatever else that ails them. Right. And then after that, I actually drink 2 glasses of water along with my hormones, like my thyroid hormone, my cortisol, because those are the hormones that actually rise when sunlight's supposed to hit your skin. Your thyroid hormone and your cortisol are supposed to rise, but since that's not the case here, I will have to take them, right? And then I actually go to my sun lamp, right, for my morning, um, like totally naked. That's so much fun. Um, and then you have a lamp, right? That already also has the infrared one, right? And so on.
I have a lamp with infrared and UVB.
I have I have a small one up top that's the infrared, and the bottom one that's the sun lamp. It's a makeshift.
Nice.
Because I've been doing this forever and ever. Yeah, and then so why do I drink first? Right, it's because the body is dehydrated during sleep, right? And then after that, if it's if it's not going to be a very busy morning, then I try my best to actually go for my walk, right, on an empty stomach, right? And the reason for that is that I would like to go into nutritional ketosis by walking briskly for 40 minutes, right? Where the 100 grams where the rest of the glucose left in my liver is actually used up during my walk, right? And what does a brisk walk mean, Nat? Is being able to talk, but you have to catch your breath. That's about 40 minutes, right? And then you shift to nutritional ketosis mode, right? So that's what happens then. And then after that, I actually make my. This is not it, but I have what's called, what they tease me in Home Hope as the coffee mud. It's my coffee that has the collagen peptides, the MCT, the mushrooms, all the powders that I can put in capsules, right? And it tastes like mud, and I love it, right? And I sip that, right? I sip it all the way to noon, and I start basically working at about 10 a.m. right, and onwards. What's important that I have instituted is actually, I used to have like a standing desk, and I used to walk and all that kind of crap, right? But now it's actually more important that you really stand up and walk around the block and so on. Because at my age, the things that fatigue me are no longer the things that used to fatigue me when I was younger. At my age, what fatigues me is decision fatigue, right? When you have to make one decision after the other, and it's going to be affecting the lives of other people, right? And you're making all these decisions all the time, be it, the management of a company or the management of a nonprofit and so on. So these are affecting the lives of people. And with students, they will be affecting the lives. So, you have all of those considerations that are there, knowing that you have a responsibility not only to yourself and to others, but there's this responsibility to your community, to your country, to the world, to the cosmos. It's just always there. It's just pervasive that that there is that, responsibility within you to be aware that all of your actions are actually matter. Right? They matter, no matter how insignificant you think they are. But the thing that I always make sure during the day is their breathing breaks, right? I have this theory, Nat, that we were born, that we evolved as single cells. We were parasympathetic, right? The nervous system is a late invention. So, you see the sea creatures, in the ocean, just going, right? You get predated on shore, but then when you're on land, it's just like, so. And then I read this book once that made an impression on me that I remember throughout the day, and says, Ted, all yoga is parasympathetic gymnastics. So all I'm really doing is actually going back to that evolutionary mode where we're actually relaxed, and
Yeah.
take things as they are, right? And the big thing that meditation actually teaches you is non-reactivity, right? To accept things the way
Mm-hmm.
they are.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want
Yeah.
to, yeah. So I have this definition of happiness that I always maintain during the day, right? Is the unconditional internal acceptance of the way things are, right?
Beautiful.
So
Yeah.
internal, because that's the way they are. External, if you have kids, for example, you love them, but they will fight. So you teach them externally about conflict resolution and other stuff. You can extend that to something like an Israel, Gaza conflict and all of that. So it's the same fractal, that just goes. So, this is during the day now. It's like not forgetting the fundamental principles of how you really want to live.
Mm-hmm.
Do you really want all of these thoughts to be bothering you all the time, or do you want to be a good friend to yourself, right? There's this famous conversation that I heard where, even treat myself the way I treat my best friend. I'm horrible to myself, but you're my best friend.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
nice, right?
A
So,
hundred
so,
percent.
and that's what drives me during the day, is going back always to first principles of how do I want to live. Sure, light, water, magnetism. Your water is, all of those filtered and reverse osmosis and whatever, right? And your light is like, you have your system which actually changes the frequencies of light. You have your air filters and so on. You follow the cadence of the sunlight, but in the end, you are looking at essentially a life that is more relaxed in terms of just letting things, no matter how annoying or alarming it may be, just something so little as, whatever, someone rolled the toothpaste wrong among younger people, or
Yeah.
as big as something political, right?
Yeah.
And these are just waves in the ocean. They're just going, right? And if you can do that, then that's what I actually try to do every day. Is basically sink at the bottom of the lake and let the storm be on top.
Pass.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's our zombie
Mm-hmm.
on top. And it's for me, it's always useful to just look away from whatever that you're doing, take a deep breath, right? Don't even ask yourself, why am I doing this? Just take a deep
Just do
breath,
it.
right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And for those of you who have existential angst like me, stop asking whether or not life has meaning. Okay, so what's the
Mm-hmm.
purpose of my life? What's the meaning of life? And my favorite response to that was that given by Sam Harris. Is that, the meaning of life is a psychological question masquerading as a philosophical one, and I actually love that. but, but that's my day, and I follow my sleep anchoring technique, which is at night. Sleep at the time that you said you're going to sleep, right? So
Mm-hmm.
11:30 p.m. I already start preparing myself to go to bed. At midnight, I'm in bed. I'm awake at 8 a.m. Actually, about 7:30 or so. I have a bed with a cooling pad. A bed with a cooling pad. So it's very high tech. It also has uh, frequency generating magnets, right? Which are
Yeah.
set to, for me, it's set to 2 hertz because it makes me sleep better, right? It's
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
underneath the cooling pad. So there's a lot of things going on in the room. so,
Yeah.
but where,
Exactly.
where you have to put electrical tape at all the LEDs so you can just have a decent night's sleep.
I know. And the blackout blinds
And
and the thing. Yeah.
yes, and everything else. But those are actually just those are things that you can do. But the best thing that you can do is to adjust what's inside you, right? Like it's basically the home hope thing. Like, how do I look at this, right? How do I look at this situation? And you could always take a look at how you react to a situation versus counting to three and how do I respond to a situation. And most of life, most irritations in life, and most disastrous events in life are failing to bite your tongue in those 3 seconds
Make that
when you should have been responding instead of reacting. So
that's such good advice. I was going to ask you, if you had to condense your entire approach to longevity into one sentence, what would it be? I think you kind of answered it, but maybe you'll say it
just
differently one more time.
Just one word. Balance.
Love it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Because, the reason why is that you cannot be assured of longevity, right? You don't know when you're going to die for whatever reason, right? You just know that you're statistically closer to death when you're older, but you still don't know when you're going to die. Rejuvenity is my word, right? But, the quality of your life, you have access to that, right?
Yeah.
And it's a balance. You know that the good always has to come with the bad. The light has to come with the dark. Otherwise, you'll never know, right? So it's this dynamic play, right, of all of this, and you have to be relaxed in taking all of that, right? Because that's the nature. That's the nature of it, right? So it's that balance that you maintain, and you'll have a high quality life. And a high quality life has actually already been defined by neurologists. The first condition of high quality life is a life without pain, right? And then the Californians actually started twisting it, right? It's now a life without emotional pain, a life without mental pain, a life without spiritual pain.
Pain. There's no pain. That's it.
It's all pain. But that's the high quality life, right? And we should be cognizant of these basic things, right? Basic things, because the goal of evolution is, survival and reproduction. It's not happiness, right? Happiness is always an inside job, right?
Yeah.
And if you can define happiness, the way I have a definition of happiness, then you know when you are happy and when you're not.
Right? Yeah, 100%. Dr. Ted, thank you for all of this. This has been a fantastic conversation. I so appreciate you and appreciate you taking the time. I'd like to invite you to share with people how they can learn more about Home Hope and the work that you do. And I mean, you're booked, you're busy, but you have lots of Home Hope practitioners that you've now certified out in the world.
Yes. Come to homehope.org. That's HOMEHOPE.org. Take a look at what we have to offer. If you need continuing medical education credits, we actually give some of the highest credits out there. We're at 45 credits for clinical metabolomics. We have a lot of modules in there: clinical metabolomics, gut immune system, exposomics, chronobiology, evolutionary medicine, epigenetics, right? So those are 7. And then we have advanced modules. For example, if you want to learn about how to use cannabis for health optimization, we have that module. If you want to, there's also a module which I actually took a look at, which is we have a peptides for health optimization. If you want to do that, coming up will be a couple of my modules for which I'm going to be using artificial intelligence, right? So it's a lot more interactive. Is hormones for health optimization. And of course, one of the more awaited ones is psychedelics for health optimization. Nat knows that I'm a big nut when it comes to psychedelics and using it for neurogenesis and and all of those things. So those are on there. It's at homehope.org. Come see us. We have a fantastic faculty, and we actually have student cohorts. We could actually participate in the discussion, and while you're learning the module at your own pace. We have little discussions about cases and what the clinical curves are. It's actually geared to the following question. When I created those modules, when I asked the faculty to create those modules, you have a client in front of you. What do you do? So it's very clinical. You can go into the deep rabbit holes, right, of the didactics because it's all there. But in the end, you will have to be facing a patient or a client, and you should know what to do and why.
Be the cell.
Yeah.
Be the cell.
Yeah.
Dr. Ted, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Such a pleasure.